The information in this film is purely conjecture, designed to stimulate your mind and aid in the watching process for all members of the BOC and the Rapture of the Church. Viewer discretion is advised.
Alright guys, you're about to enter into scripture thinking out loud / making you think zone. Buckle up, it's about to get wild.
For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near, at the doors. Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away, till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow. For it is soon cut off, and we fly away.
The first wave of European Jews start to immigrate. By the end of World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapses and Palestine is under British rule. It's 1917. Britain declares its support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The number of Jewish settlers grow, fueling tensions between the Arabs and the Jews. The violence between the two sides caused Britain to bow out and let the UN take over. The UN approves of a plan to split Palestine into two states: Jewish Israel, Arab Palestine. The city of Jerusalem, which is sacred to Muslims, Christians, and Jews, is now a UN-controlled international zone. Jews accept the UN partition plan and declare independence as the State of Israel. But neighboring Arab countries object to the land takeover. This marks the beginning of the First Arab-Israeli War. Israel is victorious and makes a grab for the land intended for the Palestinian state under the UN. The land gets divided into three parts. Jordan occupies the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Egypt occupies Gaza. It's 1967. The Six-Day War breaks out between Israel and neighboring Arab countries, and by the end of it, the map looks something like this. Palestine is now fully occupied by Israel.
Hello everyone, this is Michael from Centurions of Faith. I hope everyone is doing well, and just wanted to go over a new Watchmen update with you guys to kind of have some things to look at, some information to chew on, and to keep your spirits lifted, right? Because it's challenging going into another Gregorian 2022, another year according to this particular calendar. But we kind of had this preamble of the Jewish nation, right, in the fig tree generation. This is so important, guys, because this really establishes something far beyond our calendars. Now, I wanted to point this out because as I was just pondering on this concept, right, of the fig tree generation, this really does solve a lot of problems. Now, we have some naysayers saying, oh, you know, what if we're hundreds of years off? But I would beg to differ extremely, because I believe the Lord knew in his infinite wisdom far before all this took place that he would give his servants, the prophets, right, the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Now, that being said, I believe the Lord instructed and gave us this fig tree generation because no matter how far off the Gregorian calendar was, you know, lunar calendars are, solar calendar, all the different types of calendars, we have a definite established timeline with the fig tree generation. You understand, it doesn't matter what all the years say, right? Not hearsay, but what the years are saying, because we have a timeline, definitively establish a time zone with the fig tree generation. I really believe that's why the Lord gave us this time zone, because otherwise you would have people arguing all day long about calendars. Now, there is one thing that we have to establish with this particular time zone, is how God keeps track of time.
Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. Then God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the 4th day.
Okay, so the biggest thing we have is that the fig tree anchors us to a specific time frame. Thus, that means it cannot be any sooner, and it definitely cannot be years and years later. It's impossible. We have the prophecy fulfilled of the fig tree generation, Israel becoming a nation. Now, there's a little bit of a gray area, if you will, that's around when they became a nation. However, I was watching Robert Breaker's sermon, and I'll link that in the description. It was titled his last sermon of 2021, and he was talking about how March 10th, 1949 was mentioned as a possible start date for the fig tree generation. And without getting right into why that immediately perked my ears up, I went ahead and took a look at that because my wife actually mentioned something that I almost forgot about. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But looking at it, I immediately seen that March 10 was ADAR 7. Okay, now this is ADAR 7 corrected time frame, because Israel is going to ADAR 2, but we know that that's not correct as far as the calendar goes, especially when we're tracking it with the moon, right? The moons, like Dr. Barry All talks about, how they really should be called moons. That's probably where they actually get the word from. However, speaking about that, I think it's absolutely fascinating that ADAR 7 is the same day, right, that Moses was born. Not only was Moses born on ADAR 7, but he died at the 120, right, the period right before judgment, right, the 120 on ADAR 7, which is coming up very, very soon. That's March 10th. And I put some calendars together, and I'll be continually showing these calendars so people can keep track and keeping them more readily available, because it takes time to do all these, and I understand that. And but I think that's absolutely fascinating about Moses. And when I looked at March 10th, 1949, in pertaining to Israel, was actually when they hoisted their flag after the final victory during their war. And they were also, very shortly later after, they were on May 11th, they were accepted in as the 59th nation into the United Nations. This is why I brought up the moon and calendars, because we have the wheel here, right? It's the wheel of time, if you will, Hebrew calendar. And I also put up the Gregorian, alright, so the Tevet, and we got a little bit of time before we enter into Shavat, right? Shavat has a very interesting feast day coming up that I wanted to share about. And I think you'll find it very interesting as well, and how this all kind of interconnects, if you will. But before we go on to that, I'm just going to retouch on the fig tree generation, the 80 years gap that we have here that has to be ended by the 80 years Dr. Barry All mentioned something in his last video that I found very interesting, that me and my wife also was pondering about how the tribulation period doesn't necessarily have to end the moment, right, that Jesus returns. Now, obviously, we have some big events happening. That being said, we have the idea, right, that Jesus can come back, right, on Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, the fall feast, and still there could be a smidgen bit of time, because really at the end of the day, the end of the tribulation period has to fall within the fig tree generation, right? So if we have the start and the end, it's really hinges upon the start, right, of the fig tree generation. Some say it started in 1947, which I think we can kind of blow past that one now, and 1948 was like May 14th. I think we can potentially blow past that one now or soon, but then we have this new proposed idea, which actually makes sense, of the 1949 time frame. Definitely could be wrong. I'm not saying that it's absolutely 100% correct, but I just found it interesting just looking surface level, right, into these concepts, because March 10th of 2029 is the 23rd of ADAR, which you have the Purim picture that comes in Purim Fest and ADAR, but you also have on ADAR 23, it says this date marks the beginning of the 7-day inauguration period of the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary that accompanied the Jewish people in the desert following their exodus from Egypt. Moses served as the high priest during these 7 days, and on the 8th day his brother Aaron took over, as recorded in Leviticus chapters 8 through 9. The tabernacle was the center of Jewish and spiritual life, and the precursor to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Okay, so that being said, I think it's really interesting because you have that picture of the tabernacles, right? And tabernacles, just surface, Googling, not really counting moons or anything for any of these latter dates here. But we have that in the end of the year, right? But I think it's really interesting that in Adar, you have that picture. And plus, you have the picture with Moses, right? So it's kind of like a continuation, potentially marking the end of that judgment period, right, that we talked about from March 10th, or Adar 7, the life and the death, right, of Moses, which is also a picture of the law, and it's the death, right? It's very interesting and definitely something to keep in mind as we go forward, because you'll see these kind of interesting connections here we have too with this the 15th of Shabbat. Going back over to just propose a kind of another idea timeline, we have the March 10th, 1949, adding on the 80 years, 365-day years, right, minus the 2520, or the days of a prophetic year, and we come out to 16 April 2022, which is in the Nisan 14-15 time frame. So we have the Passover is mentioned in the Torah at this time. We have when the Lord was sacrificed as the sacrificial lamb. And on the 15th, we have the start at sundown, right, of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So there's quite a bit of few things happening, and it's kind of interesting because it intersects with the feast that we're getting ready to talk about, and I thought that was really interesting, the timelines and how they're kind of converging here. Okay, so before we move on, actually, I just wanted to point out this tidbit really fast. We actually, this past September, moved into the Hebrew year 5782, and I just kind of wanted to throw this in here, but because it's pretty awesome. As you see, it means to rouse oneself awake, right? Awaken, awakens, awakes, lift it, raise. I mean, this is pretty amazing. Stir. And then we have 5789, which is amazing too, because we have to lend aid. come to help, and that is at the time frame when the Lord's return is, right?
So he took the blind man by the hand, and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes, and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, I see men like trees, walking.
Said Jesus put his hands on the blind man's eyes, and he said, now open your eyes and tell me what you see. And I could almost see that blind man opening his eyes for the first time, seeing the dim outline of all those people around him, and he said, I see men as trees walking. I see men as trees walking. I see men as trees walking. I am beginning to see. I see men as trees walking. I see men as trees walking. I see men as trees walking. I'm beginning to see.
And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands standing before the God of the earth. For you shall go out with joy, and be led out with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth into singing before you, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands.
Alright guys, sorry for that rather lengthy introduction to Bishvat. So it was just kind of exciting. I happened to be looking up trees clapping and sing the song, so I had to go with it. But to Bishvat, right? So talking about this, it is a Jewish holiday. It occurs on the 15th day of Shavat, right? And that's what I was referring to earlier. And in 2021 here, it says Tu B'Shat begins at sunset on January 27th. Now that's obviously not the day that it begins here. But if we reference our little calendar, we have it on Wednesday evening on the 16th of February, which is the month of Shabbat. I'll probably repost that calendar here in a little bit, just so you can get it one last shot and kind of see what's going on. But it's actually really exciting because there's actually a lot to do with the Festival of the Trees, the New Year of the Trees. And I think it's so hilarious because Dr. Barry always is making jokes about the Festival of the Trees. And I was like, that'd be really interesting if this festival actually meant something larger, right? So there's so many tie-ins, and it's definitely something exciting to look at. So as we look, we see that the New Year for the trees is called Rosh Hashanah Lela No, which is literally translated to the New Year of the Trees in contemporary Israel. This day is celebrated as an ecological awareness day, and trees are planted in celebration. Now, when we look at the etymology, we see that the name Tu B'Shat is originally from the Hebrew date of the holiday, which occurs on the 15th day of Shabbat. There's the 15 again. Remember the Omicron, right? The 15th letter of the Greek alphabet, just stating out some interesting tie-ins, okay? It stands for the Hebrew letter Tet and Vav, which together have a numerical value of 9 and 6. And when I kind of did a little reading about 9, I threw a link in the educational links in the description that you can look yourself. It has some interesting tie-ins with Old Testament sorcery or pharmakia and judgment, right? It's pretty interesting. Again, I refer to the description to read it for yourselves and be a Berean about it. But we also have in 6, which is the Vav, but which we know is also a picture of salvation. So 9 and 6, judgment and deliverance, right? Which is so cool, which is added up to the 15. That's actually where they get the date for Tu B'Shat. Totally cool. Tu B'Shat falls on the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shabbat, and it begins a 3-month series, alright, in years without leap years now. So you know how the lunar calendar is off a little bit. So when there's no discrepancy, it has a 3-month series or cycle that goes from new moon to new moon, and it ends on Passover, which I thought was really interesting because you have that 3-month and 90-day period that exactly extends to Passover on the new moon. And I checked, and this year, 2022, Gregorian calendar is not a leap year. The next leap year will be in 2024, which means the next leap year day will be 29th of February 2024. This is really exciting because we see that the year is 5782 that we are currently in. We just passed into this, I believe, September 7th, 2021. Again, covering it, we see that it is the year in Strong's. It is stirs up or awaken. We have the 7-year span, right, leading us to 5789, which is the future return of Jesus. In the year in Strong's, it literally is to lend, come help, and assemble yourselves, as we've seen earlier, which is absolutely fantastic. All that being said, that leads us right back to something interesting, which is the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. We have 2 verses here that you can see when referencing these particular Strong's year that we're in, the 5782. I sleep, but my heart waketh. There's the 5782, right? We have Songs 416, awake. There's the 5782. A north wind and come, thou south, and blow upon my garden. Alright, so you can look at the scriptures, and we've all known the Song of Solomon has pointed towards a type of Gentile rapture. And it's a spring wedding, right? It's the springtime that we've all talked about in the past. And unfortunately, last year when it passed up, we continued looking forward at other dates. But there really is no better date than this springtime rapture, right? We have the fig tree, which is a notorious picture of Israel. And if we have the fig tree, how much more fitting would it be to have the almond tree, which is an awesome picture of a Gentile, right? You have the 2 trees, Israel, figs, and Gentile, we have our almonds, right? The almond tree. And I thought it was interesting that on Tu B'Shvat, they actually celebrate and eat 7 different assortments. Now, there's more sometimes, but they have 7 different assortments of fruits and nuts and almonds and things of that nature. And I thought about the 7 churches, and I thought that was really interesting. And when we look at the Manorah construction, right, because we're coming out of Hanukkah talking about, you know, the lampstands. The Manorah construction itself, the Hebrew Bible states that God has revealed the design for the menorah to Moses. There's a huge construction process, right, that he intricately describes on how to make it, how to hammer it, making the flower cups and buds and blossoms with one piece, and how the branches are extended from side to side, 3 on one and 3 on the other. It's a very, very detailed account of how exactly it's made, as seen below. It's pretty lengthy. But when we look at a gentleman named Kevin Connor, who has studied this, he has noted that the original menorah described in Exodus 25, that each of the 6 tributary branches coming out of the main shaft was decorated with 3 sets of cups, shaped like almond blossoms. There we go again, connecting the lampstands, the menorah, the church, with the almonds, right? The almond tree, a bulb and a flower. In Exodus 25:33, this would create 3 sets of 3 units on each branch, in a total of 9 units per branch. The main shaft, however, had 4 sets of blossoms, bulbs, and flowers, making a total of 12 units on each shaft. In Exodus 25:34, this would create a total of 66 units, which Connor claims is a picture of the Protestant canon of Scripture, right? Because we have 66 books. Moreover, Connor notes that the total decorative units on the shaft of the 3 branches equates to 39, which is actually the number of the Old Testament books. And then the remaining units comes up to 27. So you actually literally, from the 66, have a division of the 39 which is literally how much is in canon in the Old Testament, and the 27, which is in the New Testament books canon. And that's absolutely epic. Like how that really speaks to the word, right? Being a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path, right? And going forward, talking about the divisions of the Bible, I thought I would leave off with referencing the Bible. Of course, it's the 66 books, also a Trinity representation, 3 sets of 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The book is divided by the Old Testament, or covenant, right, and the New Covenant Testament. It's written in 2 alphanumeric languages that have a numeric value for each letter. The representation of the brides can be seen here because of the 2 languages. We have the Jews, or the Hebraic text, and the Gentiles with the Greek text. We also have the law, right, the natural, and we have the New Testament, right, with grace and the spiritual. And I just think it's so awesome how God has patterned this all throughout. So if Hanukkah comes and goes, I'm definitely going to keep my eye on a springtime potential watch time for sure. Especially how awesome would it be to see the trees clapping and the bride going to be with the Lord on the 15th of Shabbat. So, but I think that 3-month time period from the 15th of Shabbat to Passover is going to be the season to be looking at for sure. God bless you guys.
That's all, folks.